Naya stood in front of the mirror, her reflection both familiar and foreign. The woman who stared back looked composed, her braid out swept neatly to one side, her fitted navy dress hugging her frame with elegance, her red glasses a sharp accent of power and style. Yet beneath the flawless exterior, the memory of late nights lingered like an unshakable shadow. The coffee runs that stretched into dawn, the whispered jokes over stacks of contracts, the quiet dinners when the rest of the building slept. All those moments carried an intimacy neither of them dared to name. She could still hear his voice from that night, low and steady, as if rehearsed. "You are too valuable to the company to allow these feelings to control us. Whatever this is, whatever has been brewing between us, it can't go anywhere." The words had carved through her like glass. She remembered holding her breath, searching, his expression for some sign that he didn't mean it. But Arthur Walker was nothing if not disciplined. His jaw had been set, his eyes unwavering, and the very next morning he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just a silence that settled like ash. Now, 6 months later, Arthur stepped off his private jet onto New York soil. The crisp air greeted him, sharp against his face, while the city skyline glimmered with its usual arrogance. For years, this view had meant triumph. New York was his kingdom, Walker Global his empire. But as the black car pulled away from the runway and into the pulsing streets, the sight of the towering glass buildings felt oddly hollow. London had been a distraction, one he told himself he needed. Endless negotiations, 12-hour boardroom sessions, enough noise to drown out the one name that haunted him, Naya Croft. Her name clung to him, refusing to be exorcised. He hadn't called, he hadn't written. For 6 long months, he had forced himself to believe distance was discipline, and discipline was necessary. Yet the thought of seeing her again set a tightness in his chest that not even his perfectly tailored suit could disguise. When the elevator doors slid open onto the executive floor, the familiar scent of polished marble and expensive cologne, it filled his senses. Everything looked the same, untouched by his absence, sleek, impersonal, efficient. But then his gaze shifted, and time itself seemed to stutter. She was there. Naya stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the amber glow of the setting sun framing her silhouette like a painting. Honey-toned skin, an elegant posture, lips painted a shade of dark crimson that dared him to remember how close he had once stood to her. She turned slowly, and their eyes met. Arthur's breath caught. For a heartbeat, he thought she might smile, the way she used to. Soft, almost shy, the kind of smile that unraveled his composure. Instead, her expression was cool, her gaze measured and detached. "Welcome back, Mr. Walker," she said evenly, her voice polished into professionalism. "Naya," he breathed, softer than he intended. "It's good to see you." A faint smile touched her lips, but it never reached her eyes. "I'll have the acquisition reports on your desk by tomorrow morning." Before he could respond, she turned. Her heels clicked against the marble as she walked away, leaving him rooted in place, a knot twisted in his chest. She had moved on. She had built walls he wasn't sure he had the right or the strength to tear down. And for the first time, in his carefully controlled life, Arthur Walker wondered if he had made the greatest mistake of all. The moment Naya walked into her apartment, she slipped off her heels and tossed her bag onto the couch. She pulled out her phone and dialed the one person who always knew what to say. "Cam, he's back," she blurted before her sister could even say hello. There was a pause on the other end. Then Camilla's voice softened. "Your CEO, boss?" "Yes." Naya's shoulders slumped as she sank onto the armrest. "I saw him today, standing in the office like he'd never left." "It's 6 months, Cam, and I thought I would have gotten over him by now. But the second I saw his face, it was like nothing had changed. And I feel so foolish. We weren't even in a relationship." Camilla sighed, her tone both knowing and tender. Naya, the heart doesn't care about technicalities. It only knows how to feel. And clearly he felt something too, or else he wouldn't have run off to London like a coward. Naya let out a bitter laugh. A coward in a three-piece suit. Don't beat yourself up, Camilla said firmly. You're human, not some machine he can just shut down. If your chest still hurts when you look at him, that's proof you cared. And caring is never foolish. 30 minutes later, Camilla arrived at Naya's apartment, holding up a gallon of their favorite ice cream like a trophy. Emergency protocol, she announced. Chocolate fudge brownie, 2 spoons, 0 judgment. Naya grinned despite herself, opening the door wider. Soon, the 2 sisters were curled up on the couch under a blanket, the TV flickering with the familiar comedy they'd watched a dozen times before. Laughter filled the apartment, a welcome relief from the storm inside Naya's chest. Still, as she licked a spoonful of ice cream, her thoughts drifted back to Arthur Walker. No matter how much sugar and laughter she drowned herself in, his shadow lingered, refusing to leave her alone. 6 months passed, and the space between Arthur Walker and Naya Croft became a chasm neither dared to bridge. The tension that once hummed beneath late-night meetings had cooled into something sharper, something harder. He had left her once without explanation. She had learned how to armor herself against him. Her colleagues whispered about it quietly, how she was seeing someone in the accounting department, Vance Williams. He was dependable, well-liked, and the kind of man who brought his own lunch, in carefully packed containers. Not flashy like Arthur, not commanding every room he walked into. Vance was steady, approachable. And perhaps that was exactly why Naya had allowed herself to accept his gentle persistence. Arthur saw them once. He had gone down to the break room for a rare cup of coffee instead of having his assistant bring one in. And there they were, Naya leaning against the counter, laughing at something Vance said. Her smile was wide, unguarded, the kind of smile Arthur hadn't seen directed at him in months. Something twisted in his chest as Vance brushed a crumb from the corner of her lip, casual and familiar. Arthur looked away before they could notice him, but the image stuck with him. He told himself it was nothing, that she deserved happiness, even if it wasn't with him. Yet the hollow ache that followed refused to leave, no matter how many contracts he signed or flights he boarded. For her part, Naya was careful. She kept her interactions with Arthur strictly professional. Reports delivered on time, meetings attended with precision, emails concise and polite. She never let her gaze linger, never let her voice soften. It was as if she had locked every vulnerable part of herself in a vault and swallowed the key. But inside, she remembered. She remembered what it felt like to sit across from him at midnight dinners, the world quiet except for their laughter. She remembered the warmth of his hand brushing hers when they reached for the same file, and she remembered the way he had broken her, telling her their connection couldn't exist, then disappearing without a word. She had loved Arthur once, deeply, recklessly, and he had shattered that trust so cleanly, she doubted it could ever be repaired. So she built walls, and behind them, she worked. Day after day, Naya poured herself into her career. Campaigns, pitches, client dinners, she took it all and turned it into fuel. Her efforts did not go unnoticed. 4 months after Arthur's return, she was promoted to senior marketing strategist. The congratulatory emails poured in. Her colleagues raised glasses to her at happy hour. Even Arthur, in the middle of a board meeting, had looked at her with something resembling pride. And yet, even with her achievements, her heart remained restless. Vance noticed the shift first. They were at dinner, a cozy Italian restaurant near the office. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. She smiled politely, but her eyes seemed far away. "You've been different lately," he said gently, searching her face. "Distant, like part of you is somewhere else." Naya's fork stilled over her plate. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The kind eyes, the boyish grin that had first caught her attention, the quiet steadiness he carried like an anchor. He didn't deserve half-truths. He deserved honesty, even if it hurt. "You're right," she admitted softly. "I have been distant, not because of you, because of me." Vance tilted his head, waiting. "My heart is still recovering," she continued, her voice catching slightly, "from something that never really was, a relationship where seeds were planted but never grew. He was a person of influence and power. There were looks, unspoken words, but we never crossed that line. But still, it left its mark. I thought I was over it, but sometimes the echoes catch me off guard." Vance was silent for a moment, his thumb tracing circles against her hand. "So you're saying I'm competing with a ghost?" Naya gave a small, rueful smile. "Maybe, but I don't want to live in the past. I want to give the present a chance. I just need time. I can't promise more than that right now, but I am willing to see where this can go." For a second, Vance simply studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile tugged at his lips. "At least you're giving me a chance," he said. Relief washed over her, though it was tinged with guilt. She wanted to feel more, wanted to give him the whole of her heart, but she knew it wasn't hers to give yet. Not fully. Later that night, as she unlocked her apartment door and slipped inside, Naya leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Vance was good to her. Good in ways Arthur had never been. Gentle, patient, honest. He deserved her whole heart. But when she tried to imagine a future where she belonged entirely to Vance, but Arthur's face still lingered in the shadows of her mind, and that was the truth she could not escape. Arthur sat at the head of the boardroom table, the glow of the city skyline spilling through the tall glass windows. He should have been focused on the quarterly reports his CFO was presenting, but his eyes drifted to the far end of the room, where Naya sat poised, her pen moving swiftly across her notepad. She looked confident, assured, every inch the senior marketing strategist she had worked tirelessly to become. When the board congratulated her on the latest campaign results, she smiled gracefully, accepting the praise with calm humility. Arthur felt a strange mix of pride and ache swell in his chest. She wasn't the same woman he had left behind 6 months ago. Back then, she was brilliant but soft, her emotions sometimes peeking through her professionalism. Now she was polished, untouchable, with a quiet authority that drew admiration from everyone in the room, and none of it had anything to do with him. Arthur's jaw tightened as his gaze lingered on her. He had once been her confidant, the one who knew her midnight laughter, the subtle tilt of her head when she disagreed, but didn't say so aloud. Now he was just her boss. A man she addressed with cool professionalism, never once letting him glimpse the warmth he remembered. What stung more was Vance. Arthur had noticed them together more than once. A passing conversation in the hallway, shared coffees in the break room, even a moment when Vance leaned too close, whispering something that made Naya laugh. That laugh, the same one that used to belong to him, now belonged to another man. The thought gnawed at him. Vance was steady, reliable, the kind of man who would never leave Naya questioning where she stood. Arthur knew this because he had done the opposite. He had left her with nothing but unanswered questions and a fractured trust. He told himself it shouldn't matter, that she was free to live her life, to choose whoever she wanted. But every time he saw her with Vance, something inside him coiled tighter, a sharp reminder that he had walked away from something rare, and someone else had stepped into the space he abandoned. When the meeting ended, Arthur lingered, watching Naya gather her files. She didn't glance his way, didn't acknowledge him beyond a polite nod as she left the room. The sound of her heels faded down the corridor, leaving him alone with his thoughts. For the first time in years, Arthur Walker felt powerless, Not in business, not in wealth or influence, but in the one place that mattered most, with her. And as much as he tried to bury it, jealousy was a bitter taste he could not swallow. But beneath her polished exterior, Naya was unraveling. The long hours, endless deadlines, and emotional strain of maintaining her composure around Arthur were wearing her down. Her colleagues saw the strength, the composure, the sharp wit in meetings, but they didn't see the sleepless nights, the quiet moments where she clutched her chest and struggled to draw a full breath. She told herself it was stress. She told herself it was nothing. Yet the fatigue grew heavier, the cough more persistent, until even walking across the office left her winded. Still she pressed on. She had fought too hard for her position, for her sense of independence, to show weakness. Now it happened on a Tuesday afternoon. The conference room was packed. A dozen executives gathered as Naya stood at the head of the table, presenting the new marketing strategy. Her voice was steady at first, slides clicking seamlessly across the screen. Then suddenly, mid-sentence, her chest tightened like a vice. The words caught in her throat, her vision blurring at the edges. She staggered. A sharp pain shot through her chest, stealing the air from her lungs. The papers in her hands slipped and scattered across the floor. "Naya?" Arthur's voice cut through the rising panic. Chairs scraped back, voices shouted, but Arthur was already at her side, his hands gripping her shoulders as she swayed dangerously. Her lips trembled. I can't breathe." Her face was ashen, beads of sweat breaking along her hairline. Arthur's heart lurched in his chest. He lowered her gently into the chair, his own voice unsteady as he barked orders. "Call 911, now!" The room erupted into chaos. Someone dialed emergency services, another rushed to clear the table. Arthur stayed anchored beside her, one hand gripping hers, the other steadying her trembling frame. Every shallow gasp rattled through her body like broken glass. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, their voices brisk and practiced as they worked to stabilize her. The sight of tubes, oxygen masks, and their urgent commands made Arthur's throat go dry. He refused to let go of her hand as they wheeled her toward the waiting ambulance. "You can't come with—" one of the paramedics began. "I'm not leaving her," Arthur snapped, his tone sharper than he intended. He climbed in beside her without another word, ignoring the protests of his assistant, who hovered helplessly at the curb. Inside the ambulance, the world blurred into a haze of sirens and flashing lights. Arthur's grip on Naya's hand never wavered. He leaned close, his voice low and urgent. "Stay with me, Naya. Don't you dare give up." Her eyes fluttered open for a fraction of a second, unfocused, then closed again. At the hospital, doctors swarmed her. The diagnosis came quickly and hit Arthur like a punch. Severe pneumonia complicated by a traumatic pneumothorax. Her lung had collapsed. Surgery was required immediately. Arthur stood frozen as the words sank in. A man who had commanded billion-dollar deals with steady confidence now felt powerless, trembling as he signed the consent forms. Hours blurred together as he waited outside the operating room, pacing the sterile hallway with restless steps. Every time a nurse passed, he stopped them, desperate for news, but there was nothing more they could tell him. For the first time in years, Arthur Walker felt stripped of control. His wealth, his influence, his carefully cultivated power, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was the woman fighting for her life behind those double doors. And as he sat, head in his hands, his heart pounding in his chest, one truth rose above all else. He could lose her. The sterile hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic, the soft beeping of machines punctuating the silence. Arthur hadn't moved from his chair since they wheeled Naya out of surgery. His tie hung loose around his neck, his perfectly combed hair now mussed from hours of running his hand through it. The strong, unshakable CEO looked anything but composed. The doctor opened quietly, and in stepped Naya's family. Her mother, Lillian, had the same dark, almond-shaped eyes as her daughter, though hers carried years of wisdom and worry. She pressed a hand to her mouth when she saw Naya lying pale and still against the sheets. Camilla, her younger sister, followed, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her expression sharp with protectiveness. Arthur stood quickly, awkwardly. "Mrs. Croft, Camilla." Lillian crossed to the bed, brushing her fingers gently over her daughter's hair. Her voice trembled with love and frustration. "She's been working too hard, always pushing herself. She never takes care of herself." Arthur swallowed, guilt rising like a tide. He had been so consumed by his own turmoil, his jealousy, his regret, that he hadn't seen how much Naya was silently carrying. He should have noticed the fatigue, the way she moved slower some days, the faint rasp in her laugh. Instead, he had let the distance grow. Camilla's eyes narrowed as she studied him. "You stayed?" "Yes," Arthur said simply, his voice low. "I wasn't going to leave her." There was no warmth in Camilla's expression, but she nodded, acknowledging him without softening. Lillian, however, placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being here when she needed someone." Arthur only nodded, his throat too tight for words. Hours later, Naya stirred. Her lashes fluttered against her cheeks, and she opened her eyes with effort. The world was hazy, unfamiliar, until her gaze landed on him. Arthur, still sitting beside her, eyes rimmed red from exhaustion. Her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. What are you doing here?" Arthur leaned forward, every word rough with emotion. "I wasn't going to leave you." For a moment, something flickered in her expression, something fragile, almost hopeful, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She turned her face away, too weak to summon the energy to push him out, but unwilling to let him in. The tension in the room deepened when the door opened again. Vance stepped inside, a bouquet of lilies clutched awkwardly in his hand. His eyes widened when he saw Arthur seated at Naya's side, looking as though he belonged there. "Mr. Walker?" Vance said stiffly, his tone caught between respect and confusion. "I didn't expect to see you here." Arthur straightened, his jaw tight. "She collapsed in the office. I wasn't about to leave her alone." Something unreadable passed over Vance's face. He looked at Naya, then back at Arthur. The weight of unspoken questions thick in the air. At last, Arthur pushed back his chair and stood. "I'll give you both some privacy." He brushed past Vance, his tall frame filling the doorway before disappearing into the hall. Vance set the flowers on the table, then pulled the chair closer to the bed. His voice was softer when he spoke, but edged with something deeper. "Naya, is he the one?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Vance leaned in, searching her face. "I remember what you said to me once, about your heart still healing, about how there was someone before, someone who planted seeds that never grew. Was it him? Was Arthur Walker the seed?" Naya closed her eyes, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Yes, he's my boss, and that's all it could ever be." Vance's chest tightened. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles. "Are you sure about that? Because from where I'm standing, he had no problem jumping into that ambulance with you, and he's still here. Even when the rest of us were told to wait, he never left your side." Her tears fell freely now, hot and silent. "That doesn't change what he did," she murmured. "He left. He made me believe none of it mattered." Vance's grip tightened. "Maybe he made mistakes. Maybe he was a coward. But you can't ignore what you just saw, Naya. A man doesn't sit sleepless in a hospital chair for someone he doesn't care about." Naya turned her face toward the window, unable to answer. Her heart ached with truth she wasn't ready to face, torn between the man who had once broken her and the man who was offering her something steady now. And for the first time since Arthur's return, she realized she could no longer hide from the choice looming before her. Arthur hadn't meant to linger outside the room. He told himself he was only waiting for the doctor, only giving Naya space with Vance. But as he passed the half-open door, her voice reached him, fragile, trembling. Yes, he's the one. He's my boss, and that's all it could ever be. Words struck him like a blow. Arthur froze, his hand tightening around the doorframe as he forced himself to stay silent. Inside, he heard Vance's voice, steady and probing. Are you sure about that? Because from where I'm standing, he had no problem jumping into that ambulance, and he's still here. A man doesn't sit sleepless in a hospital chair for someone he doesn't care about. Arthur's chest constricted. He closed his eyes, shame pressing down on him with crushing weight. Naya had spoken the truth. He had planted something between them, something real, and then abandoned it before it had a chance to grow. He had been a coward, convincing himself distance was protection when all it had done was wound them both. But what cut deeper was her belief that it was over, that she could relegate him to nothing more than a title, a position, her boss. Arthur stepped back from the door, his mind churning. He could walk away, let Vance be the safe choice, let her life unfold without him. It would be easier, cleaner, less painful for them both. But the thought of letting her go, truly go, was unbearable. For Arthur Walker, giving up Naya Croft was not an option, not anymore. And as he walked down the hallway, his resolve crystallized. He would fight for her trust, for her heart, for the second chance he should never have. Arthur didn't wait long to make his move. Later that evening, as he left Naya's room and found Vance standing in the hallway. Bouquetless now, his hands shoved into his pockets, Arthur stopped him. The two men stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead adding to the tension. You care about her, Arthur said finally, his voice calm but laced with steel. Vance's gaze sharpened. I do, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Arthur nodded once, as though he expected that answer. Good, because she deserves someone who won't fail her, someone who will see her strength, but also notice when she's carrying too much. His jaw flexed. I didn't notice soon enough. Vance folded his arms, his posture steady, unflinching. Then maybe it's time you step aside. You had your chance, Walker, and you walked away. She doesn't need someone who disappears when things get complicated. She needs stability. Arthur's eyes darkened, but his voice remained measured. I won't deny my mistakes, but don't confuse distance with indifference. I left because I thought it was best for her, not because I didn't care. Funny, Vance said dryly, because she was the one left picking up the pieces. Arthur took a step closer, lowering his tone. You're right, and I will spend every moment proving I won't make that mistake again. But don't think for a second I'll walk away now. Giving her up isn't an option, not for me. The air between them bristled, two men standing firm, both unwilling to yield. And though Vance said nothing more, the silent challenge had been drawn. Arthur intended to win. The hospital quieted after visiting hours, the steady beeping of machines the only sound in Naya's room. She was propped against the pillows, pale but awake, her eyes half-lidded as she tried to sip water from the cup Arthur held for her. You don't have to be here, she murmured, her voice weak but pointed. Arthur's gaze softened, though there was a storm beneath it. I told you I'm not leaving you again. She turned her face toward the window, unwilling to meet his eyes. The wall between them was still firm, but Arthur had spent years dismantling barriers in business. This, winning back her trust, was the greatest negotiation of his life. When the door opened and her mother, Lillian, entered with Camilla at her side, Arthur rose to his feet. He had been waiting for this moment. Mrs. Croft, he began carefully, Naya needs care at home. She can't manage this recovery alone. Lillian's brows knitted. She has her family. She'll come home with us. Arthur's jaw tightened. Your home isn't equipped for what she needs. My penthouse has space, privacy, and I'll hire a full-time nurse. She'll be comfortable there. Camilla stepped forward, her protective streak flashing. You were the one who broke her heart. Now you want to swoop in and play savior. Arthur met her fiery gaze without flinching. I broke her heart because I thought I was protecting her. If people saw us together, they'd question her every promotion, every success. I couldn't let them diminish what she's worked so hard for. But since I've been gone, she's proven herself. No one can take that from her now, and I no longer care what people think. Camilla crossed her arms, skepticism etched across her face. Words are easy. Actions matter. Arthur's voice steadied, every word deliberate. Then let me show you. I want Naya to recover in my home, and I want you both to move in too. That way you can see for yourself that she's cared for, by all of us. Lillian studied him for a long moment, the weight of a mother's intuition heavy in her gaze. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. If Naya agrees, then we'll consider it. When Naya opened her mouth to protest, Arthur leaned down, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Please, let me do this for you. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she lacked the strength to argue further. Arthur's penthouse was nothing like the sterile walls of the hospital. Expansive windows overlooked the glittering skyline, and the air was hushed, almost reverent. He had converted the guest suite into a private recovery space, stocked with medical equipment and softened by flowers Camilla insisted on bringing from home. A nurse was on call around the clock, ensuring Naya's needs were met. At first, she kept her guard up, refusing to let Arthur's presence lull her into forgetting the past. But Arthur was relentless, not in pressure, but in quiet devotion. He was there every morning with breakfast, cooking meals himself, rather than letting the staff handle it. When her medication left her groggy, he read aloud from her favorite novels, his deep voice steady and grounding. When nausea overwhelmed her, he didn't hesitate to kneel beside her, holding her hair back, whispering reassurances she was too weak to argue against. Days slipped into weeks, and little by little, her walls began to crack. She found herself laughing softly at his clumsy attempts in the kitchen. She caught the way his eyes softened when he thought she was asleep. And though she tried to remind herself that love had burned her once before, her heart betrayed her with its steady, persistent ache whenever he was near. Arthur, meanwhile, had never been more certain of anything. All his life, he had chased power, wealth, validation, but none of it mattered when he was sitting beside her, listening to her breathing even out in sleep. For the first time, success wasn't a boardroom victory or a signed contract. It was simply this: earning back the trust of the only woman he had ever truly loved, and Arthur Walker was determined not to fail again. The penthouse was quiet that evening, the only sound the faint hum of the city far below. Naya sat propped up against the pillows, a blanket draped over her lap, her red glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. She had been silent through dinner, pushing food around her plate while Arthur busied himself in the kitchen, pretending not to notice. But Arthur noticed everything. When he returned to check on her, she closed the book in her lap and fixed him, with a look that made his chest tighten. Her voice was soft, but sharp with intent. "We need to talk, Arthur." He sat down carefully in the chair beside her bed, suddenly aware of how heavy his limbs felt. "All right," he said quietly. "I'm listening." Naya drew in a shallow breath, steadying herself. "You walked away. 6 months ago you told me that what we had, what was between us, wasn't allowed, that it couldn't go anywhere, and then you disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone." Her voice cracked, her fingers clutching the blanket. "Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Arthur closed his eyes, guilt washing over him in a sharp wave. "I thought I was protecting you." Her eyes flashed. "Protecting me? From what, Arthur? From feelings we both knew were real? From the possibility that people might talk?" She shook her head, anger and pain colliding in her gaze. "You didn't protect me. You broke me." The words cut him deeper than any Boardroom betrayal ever could. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his voice low and rough. You're right. I broke you. And I broke myself in the process. Every day I spent in London, I told myself I was doing the right thing, that staying away was noble, that I was shielding your reputation, your career. But the truth is, his voice faltered raw. The truth is, I was afraid. Naya blinked, startled. Afraid of what? Of how much you mattered. His confession spilled out before he could stop it. I've built my life on control, on making decisions that keep me ahead. But you... His hand hovered in the air, then dropped back into his lap. You undid me. Every late night, every laugh, every look across the table, I fell further. And it terrified me, because if I let myself have you, there would be no going back. The silence that followed was thick, pressing. Naya's heart pounded painfully. In her chest, she wanted to stay angry, to keep the walls up that she had so carefully built. But his words, his raw, unpolished honesty, chipped at the armor. So you left, she whispered, her throat tight, because you were scared. Arthur nodded, shame heavy in his posture. Yes, and it was the worst mistake of my life. His eyes lifted to hers, dark and unflinching. I can't undo the past, Naya, but I can tell you the truth now. I have never stopped wanting you, not for a single day. Her lips parted, but no words came. The room felt charged, her emotions, battling hurt, longing, disbelief. Do you even hear yourself? She finally managed. You think you can just admit this now, after everything? After watching me struggle? After nearly losing myself? Arthur leaned closer, his voice trembling with intensity. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I can't pretend anymore. I love you, Naya. I've loved you for a long time. And giving you up is not an option for me. Not now, not ever. Her breath caught, her chest aching for reasons that had nothing to do with recovery. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling hot down her cheeks. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself fall into the warmth of his words. But the wound he left still throbbed. You say you love me, she whispered, her voice breaking. But love doesn't walk away when it gets hard. Love fights. Arthur's throat tightened. He reached out, hesitating, then brushed the back of her hand with his fingers. Then let me fight now. For you. For us. Give me the chance to prove it. Her hand trembled under his, and she didn't pull away. But she didn't agree either. Instead, she turned her face toward the window, blinking at the skyline lights. We'll see, Arthur. We'll see if your fight is real this time. Arthur sat in silence, watching her, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. For the first time, the wall between them had cracked. Not broken, but cracked enough for light to slip through. And Arthur Walker vowed he would not waste it. The air in the penthouse felt different the following morning. Naya sat at the breakfast table, sipping tea, her energy still fragile, but her thoughts swirling with Arthur's late-night confession. He had said the words she had once dreamed of hearing, but a part of her still feared the cost of believing them. She didn't have long to dwell. Her mother, Lillian, found Arthur in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up as he prepared oatmeal for Naya himself. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, her gaze steady. Arthur, I want to speak plainly, she said. He set the spoon down and met her eyes. Of course. You care for my daughter. Anyone can see that. But I need to know what you truly intend, because Naya has been through enough. She doesn't need a man who will come and go, who will decide she's too complicated when things get hard. Lillian's voice tightened with emotion. If you love her, then love her openly. If not, step aside before you break her heart. Again. Arthur swallowed hard, guilt and determination colliding inside him. Mrs. Croft, I won't lie to you. I made mistakes. Leaving, pretending my feelings didn't matter. But being away only showed me how much she does matter. I'm not ashamed of her, and I don't care what anyone else thinks anymore. I want to fight for her, and I will. I won't run again." Lillian studied him, her expression softening slightly. "Then prove it. She deserves nothing less." Meanwhile, Camilla sat with Naya in her room, the younger sister's hand wrapped around hers. "I need to say this," Camilla began, her voice careful. "I worry about your heart, Naya. Not just physically, but emotionally. You've already been hurt once. I don't want to see you shattered again." Naya exhaled slowly. "I don't know if I can trust him, Cam. I hear his words, I see his actions, but the memory of him walking away, it still haunts me." Camilla squeezed her hand. "I know, but I've also seen the way he looks at you, the way he stayed at the hospital, the way he's been here every moment since. Arthur Walker doesn't strike me as the kind of man who begs for second chances, yet he's here, humbling himself every day. Maybe that means something." Naya's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. She whispered, "And what if it means I fall again, only to break harder this time?" Camilla brushed her cheek gently. "Then at least you'll know you didn't shut the door on love out of fear. That matters too." Later that afternoon, as Naya rested, her phone buzzed. Vance's name lit up the screen. She hesitated before answering. "Vance," she said softly. His voice was tentative, laced with hope. "Hi, how are you doing?" "I am getting better." "Well, you have been at Mr. Walker's for 2 weeks now, and there's rumors around the office, Naya, about you staying at Arthur's place while you recover. Are you going to stay the entire time during your recovery?" Naya closed her eyes. "Yes, he offered, and with my family here and the nurse, it seemed like the best option." Silence stretched between them before Vance spoke again. "I just need to know, do I still have a chance?" Naya's throat tightened. She cared. For Vance, his steadiness, his patience, but her heart felt torn. "Vance, you've been good to me, better than I deserve at times, but I don't have an answer yet, not one that's fair to either of us." His voice was gentle, but firm. "Then I'll wait until you do. But I need you to know I'm not stepping aside unless you tell me to." The next day at Walker Global, Vance found Arthur in his office. He closed the door behind him, his jaw set. "We need to talk," Vance said. Arthur leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but alert. "I assume this is about Naya." Vance nodded. "You hurt her once. I'm not going to stand by and watch you do it again. If you don't plan to love her openly and publicly, then step aside and let someone who will. She deserves more than secrets and half measures." Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice stayed measured. "You're right. I was cautious. Before. Too cautious. But when I was away, my feelings for her grew beyond what I could have imagined. I'm going to do everything in my power to gain her trust back, to earn her respect. And I'm not ashamed of her." Vance's expression tightened, but he didn't back down. "Then know this. I'm not going anywhere until she tells me otherwise. I'll fight for her too." Arthur stood, straightening his suit jacket, his voice edged with steel. "Then may the best man earn her heart. But understand this, Vance. My fight doesn't end until she chooses, and I intend to show her who I really am." That afternoon, Arthur made a decision. He called his assistant and scheduled a board meeting for the following week. No more secrets, no more rumors. It was time to address his feelings for Naya openly, no matter the consequences. For the first time, Arthur Walker was willing to risk his empire if it meant proving to Naya Croft that she was worth more than all of it. The boardroom was tense even before Arthur walked in. Rumors had traveled faster than stock prices. Whispers of Naya's recovery at his penthouse, speculation about what it meant, and questions about whether their CEO had finally lost his grip. Arthur entered with his usual composure, tailored, suit impeccable, shoulders squared. But beneath the polished exterior, his resolve burned like iron. This was the moment. No more half-truths, no more hiding. He took his seat at the head of the long mahogany table, his gaze sweeping over the board members who had guided Walker Global for decades. Men and women who prided themselves on tradition, reputation, and appearances. They were waiting for him to address the rumors, and he intended to. "Before we begin with quarterly projections," Arthur said, his voice carrying through the room, "there's something I need to make clear." A murmur rippled across the table. Arthur let it settle, then continued, his tone even but unyielding. "You've likely heard the rumors about Ms. Croft, about myself, and I want to put the matter to rest here and now." The CFO shifted uncomfortably. "Arthur, if this is about appearances, perhaps we should—" "No," Arthur interrupted, his voice sharp. "This isn't about appearances. It's about truth." He leaned forward, folding his hands. "Naya Croft and I are not in a relationship. We have never been in a relationship, but I intend to pursue her." The room fell silent, shock palpable. Arthur's gaze hardened. "If she is willing to be with me, then you, as this board, will need to accept that relationship. You will not question her qualifications. You will not diminish her accomplishments, and you will not drag her name through mud for my choices." "Arthur," another member began, her tone wary. He cut her off with a raised hand. "My decision is final. If my pursuit of a personal relationship threatens your comfort, then I invite you to find another board to sit on. But I will not sacrifice honesty, nor will I sacrifice her to preserve appearances." The silence deepened, thick with disbelief and resistance. A few exchanged incredulous glances, but Arthur's expression left no room for argument. He continued, his tone firm but edged with conviction. "For years, I've been guided by one principle: protect the company at all costs. But I've learned that protecting an empire while destroying your own soul is a hollow victory. Ms. Croft has proven herself more than capable since I've been away. She's earned her promotions, her respect, her place here. None of that changes. Because of me. If anything, my only regret is not acknowledging sooner how extraordinary she is." A few brows furrowed. Others leaned back in their chairs, uncomfortable but listening. Arthur pressed on, unwavering. "You may question me, question my leadership, but you will not question her. And if she chooses to be with me, you will not stand in the way. Do I make myself clear?" The chairman, an older man with silver hair and a reputation for never yielding, cleared his throat. "Arthur, this is highly irregular. Personal matters have no place in a boardroom." Arthur's eyes locked on his. "Then let me make it simple. Walker Global is my company. If my honesty makes you uncomfortable, you are free to leave. But, understand this, my decision will not change." The weight of his words settled across the table like a gavel. No one spoke. Some avoided his gaze, others shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to challenge him further. Arthur straightened, smoothing his tie. "Now, unless there are objections," he paused deliberately, daring anyone to speak, "we will move forward with business." No one moved. Satisfied, Arthur opened the folder in front of him, flipping to the first page of projections. But inside, his chest still thundered. For once, it wasn't from nerves of closing a deal. It was from the sheer gravity of what he had just risked. He had put everything on the line: his reputation, his authority, his image as a man untouched by weakness. All for her. And when the meeting finally adjourned, as the board filed out in uneasy silence, Arthur remained at the head of the table. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surface of the wood, eyes sharper, clearer than they had been in years. For the first time, he felt free. Now all that remained was convincing Naya Croft that his fight for her was real. Naya was sitting in the penthouse's sunlit lounge, her blanket pulled around her shoulders as she scrolled half-heartedly through emails on her tablet. Recovery was slow but steady, and though her body was healing, Her heart remained heavy with questions she didn't dare answer. The doorbell rang. Camilla answered, returning with Vance trailing behind her, his usual easy smile absent. "Naya," he said quietly, stepping into the room. "How are you feeling?" She set her tablet aside. "Better. Tired. What are you doing here?" Vance hesitated, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I thought you should hear this from me before anyone else does." Words spreading already. Her brows furrowed. "What?" He shifted, the weight of the truth pulling at his shoulders. "Arthur. He addressed the board this morning, told them directly about you, about his intentions." Naya froze, her breath catching. "What do you mean, addressed them?" Vance met her gaze, his eyes shadowed with something she recognized as surrender. "He told them you were never in a relationship, but that he intends to pursue you, openly, publicly. He told them if they had a problem, they could find another board to sit on. Said his decision was final." The room tilted, her heartbeat quickening. He said that?" "Yes," Vance whispered, "in front of all of them. No hedging, no excuses. He made it clear, if you'll have him, he'll stand by you no matter the fallout." Naya's lips parted, but no sound came. She had expected Arthur to fight for her quietly, perhaps stubbornly at home, but never to lay his reputation on the line so boldly. Not for her. Vance gave a small, sad smile. "I think I always knew. You and I, it wasn't the same. You cared, but you never let me in. Hearing what he did today, I realize..." He let out a soft laugh, empty of humor. "I don't have a chance now." Her throat tightened. "Vance," he held up a hand, "don't. You don't owe me anything. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "That if you give him your heart again, you make sure he's willing to carry it carefully. You deserve nothing less." Her eyes burned as he turned to leave, his footsteps heavy with finality. That evening, Arthur found her in the lounge, staring out at the skyline. He approached cautiously, his usual confidence tempered with vulnerability. "I assume you heard," he said softly. Naya turned, her honey-brown eyes sharp. "Vance told me. Is it true? You really stood in front of the board and said all that?" Arthur exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Every word. I wasn't going to let whispers define you or us. I won't hide how I feel about you anymore." He moved closer, his voice low and urgent. "I let fear control me once, and I lost you. I will not make that mistake again. Naya, I need you. Nothing, no board, no reputation, no company comes before you now." Her breath caught, emotions swirling inside her chest like a storm. "Arthur, you don't know what you're asking. You broke me. I built walls because of you. And now, you stand here expecting me to just..." Her voice faltered, trembling. "To just let you back in." Arthur sank to his knees before her chair, his eyes locked on hers, raw and unflinching. "I don't expect it. I'll earn it. Every day, every moment, for as long as it takes. But I can't keep pretending I don't need you, because I do. I always have." Naya's tears slipped free, trailing down her cheeks. She wanted to resist, to keep her heart locked away. But his words, so fierce, so unguarded, broke through the last defenses she had. Her hand trembled as she lifted it, brushing his jaw. With tentative fingers, Arthur closed his eyes, leaning into her touch as if it were the first warmth he'd felt in years. "Arthur," she whispered. His eyes opened, dark and filled with longing. "Tell me to stop, and I will. But if you don't..." She didn't. Instead, Naya leaned forward, closing the space between them. Their lips met softly at first, tentative, almost fragile. But the kiss deepened, years of unspoken words and suppressed emotions pouring out in a single moment of surrender. Arthur's hands framed her face gently, reverently, as though she might break. Naya's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. For the first time, the world around them vanished. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Arthur pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm not letting. You go again," he whispered. "Not now, not ever." Naya closed her eyes, her chest aching with relief and fear all at once. But beneath it all, one truth pulsed steady and undeniable. She believed him. Recovery wasn't quick. Naya's body healed faster than her heart. Though her strength returned in weeks, the wounds Arthur had left behind lingered like faint scars, reminders of what once was broken. Arthur understood this better than anyone. He didn't push. He didn't rush. Instead, he built their new beginning out of small, steady gestures, each one a brick of trust laid carefully in place. Every morning, he was there with breakfast. Sometimes it was elaborate, French toast with strawberries or omelets with herbs from the rooftop garden. But often it was simple, tea just the way she liked it, oatmeal sweetened with honey. He was learning her all over again, paying attention to details he had once overlooked. When her lungs ached from the strain of walking, he slowed his stride, never letting her feel weak, but instead treating each step as progress. When she grew frustrated with her limits, he steadied her with quiet encouragement. "You're stronger than you think, Naya," he would say, his voice steady, unwavering. At night, when medication made her drowsy, he would sit at her bedside and read aloud. Sometimes it was novels she loved. Sometimes company reports she pretended to care about. But mostly it was his presence that comforted her, the steady rhythm of his voice, the warmth of his hand near hers. And though she kept her guard up, cracks began to show. She laughed more often, sometimes catching herself and quickly covering it. But Arthur noticed every smile. Slowly, the wall she had built around her heart began to crumble. Camilla noticed first. One evening, after Arthur had retreated to the kitchen, she whispered, "He's different, Naya, not just in words. You can see it in his actions." Naya sighed, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "He hurt me once, Cam. What if he does it again?" Her sister's eyes softened. "Then it'll hurt, but I'd rather see you risk love than hide from it. And honestly, the way he looks at you now, like you're the only thing that matters, I don't think he's letting you go this time." Even Lillian, cautious and protective, began to soften toward him. She watched Arthur one evening as he patiently rubbed Naya's shoulders when her chest ached, his touch gentle, reverent. Later, Lillian pulled her daughter aside. "You know," she said with a faint smile, "men like him don't come around often. When they learn what really matters, they hold on. And Arthur, I think he's learned." Months passed, and the penthouse that once felt like a symbol of Arthur's loneliness became a place of warmth. Family dinners at the table, movie nights, with Camilla teasing Arthur for his terrible taste in romantic comedies, Naya's laughter filling the rooms like sunlight, and Arthur changed too. He still commanded Walker Global with precision, but his priorities shifted. Meetings were scheduled to ensure he was home for dinner. The empire he had built no longer defined him. It was simply the foundation for the life he wanted with her. Still, Arthur knew trust wasn't something given once. It had to be earned every day, and so he did, quietly, persistently, never demanding more than she was ready to give. It took a year before he knew. A full year of rebuilding, of laughter and quiet nights, of family meals where Lillian and Camilla slowly stopped watching him with suspicion and instead welcomed him as one of their own. And then came the night he decided, after a year long of rebuilding trust. The penthouse was softly lit with candles, the scent of roses mingling with the faint aroma of roasted garlic from the meal Arthur had spent all afternoon preparing himself. The table was set for 4, Naya, Camilla, Lillian, and him. But as dessert was cleared away, Arthur stood, his heart pounding harder than it had in any boardroom. "Before we end the evening," he began, his voice steady though his hands trembled slightly, "there's something I need to say." Naya, glanced up curiously, a fork still in her hand. Arthur turned first to Lillian and Camilla. "From the moment Naya came into my life, I've been a better man for it. I failed her once, and I've spent every day since trying to earn back what I lost. And none of this would have been possible without you, her family. You've trusted me enough to let me prove myself, to be here with her. For that, I am grateful." He took a breath, then dropped to one knee. Naya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide behind her glasses. Arthur pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal an elegant diamond ring. His voice wavered only slightly as he spoke. "Naya Croft, you are the love I never knew I was searching for, the strength I didn't realize I needed. I don't care about boardrooms or reputations, about whispers or appearances. All I care about is you. If you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that my love is stronger than my fear. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, her chest heaving with emotion. For a long moment the room was silent, all eyes on her. Then Naya slowly stood, her legs unsteady but her heart sure. She placed her hands on his cheeks, forcing him to look into her eyes. "You broke me once, Arthur Walker," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But you also put me back together, and I believe you now. I believe you love me, and yes, I'll marry you." Arthur's relief was overwhelming, his arms pulling her close, as laughter and tears mixed between them. Lillian wiped her eyes discreetly. Camilla clapped with unrestrained joy, and the skyline outside glittered like it was celebrating with them. Arthur slid the ring onto her finger, pressing a kiss to her hand. "I'll never stop proving this was the right choice," he vowed softly, and for the first time in years, Naya's heart felt completely at peace. The day of their wedding dawned clear and golden, the kind of day that seemed written just for them. The ceremony was intimate, yet elegant, held in the botanical gardens, where sunlight streamed through tall glass panels, cascading over blooms in full color. Naya walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, her fitted gown flowing like water around. Her braid coiled in an elegant updo. Her red glasses, her signature remained, a reminder of the woman who had fought her way to this moment. Arthur stood at the altar in a tailored black tuxedo, his eyes fixed on her with a devotion that silenced the whispers of every guest. When she reached him, he took her hands, pressing them to his lips. His vows were steady, spoken not just to her but to every moment they had survived. "I once let fear steal my courage. I once let the world's opinion outweigh my heart. Never again. Naya, you are my home, my truth, my future. I vow to love you openly, fiercely, and without hesitation, for all my days." Naya's voice trembled as she answered, "You broke me once, Arthur Walker, but you taught me that love can heal too. You've proven every day that we were meant for this. I vow to trust the man you've become, to laugh with you, to grow with you, and to stand by your side no matter what the world says." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was met with applause that echoed through the glass dome. Camilla was crying openly. Lillian clutched tissues in both hands, and even the most stoic board members shifted uncomfortably, as though they'd been forced to admit this was real, unshakable. Years later, the Walker penthouse no longer felt like the cold monument it once had been. It was a home, filled with laughter, chaos, and the patter of little feet. Their first child, a daughter named Eliana, had Arthur's sharp jawline but Naya's eyes, wide and curious behind her tiny red-framed play glasses Arthur had custom-made for her. She loved to sit at Naya's desk, doodling reports and telling everyone she was the boss like Mommy. Their second child, a son named Julian, was all energy and mischief, with Arthur's determined gaze and Naya's quick wit. He followed, Arthur everywhere, tugging at his pant legs during conference calls, insisting he wanted to help run the company. Arthur, once consumed by endless board meetings and acquisitions, now made time for bedtime stories, soccer practices, and piano recitals. Naya balanced motherhood with her thriving career, her name now synonymous with innovation and creativity. In marketing circles, together they had built a life where ambition and family coexisted. Not perfectly, but beautifully. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Arthur would find Naya on the balcony overlooking the city. He would slip his arms around her waist, his lips brushing her temple. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing this?" he would whisper. "All the time," she would reply softly, leaning back against him. "But maybe that's what makes it so precious. We know what it's like to almost miss it." Arthur would tighten his hold, his voice full of the same conviction he had carried since the day he declared her to the board. "I'll never take us for granted again," and he never did. Their story, once marked by fear and distance, had become one of healing, devotion, and a love strong enough to weather every storm. For Arthur and Naya Walker, happily ever after wasn't perfect. It was real, and it was theirs. The end. Hope you enjoyed this love story by Green Tea Tales. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you,